Hey everyone, it's finally a return to the videos. I know we haven't had one for a while and it's made you very sad. And you also just get my voice today and not my face. So somehow you may actually appreciate that. So we've already done the reading on the French Revolution from Facts and File. We've discussed it in class, but there's some causes that the reading didn't get into in much detail, at least. So I wanted to go over some of that with you pretty quickly. This will be a short video. So you already learned in class that there were three estates of France, and that their representation in the government was not equal. You learned the first estate was the clergy, basically court people. Church people. The second estate were the nobility, basically like aristocrats. And the third estate was pretty much everyone else, artisans, peasants, some middle class bourgeois type of people, but almost everyone felt they were in the third estate. And remember, when they went to the estates general, each estate had one vote. And so if the clergy and the nobility weren't paying taxes, right? And if someone came up with the idea like, hey, the nobility should pay taxes and the clergy should pay taxes, I'm sure the third estate would want that. But they only had one vote. And of course, the nobility and the clergy would vote against that. So even though the third estate was the majority of the population, they weren't getting the majority of representation in the government. So it was nothing like our House of Representatives is structured. So just to get a visual illustration, because I know you guys like the visuals. So here's the first estate that was mostly the clergy, priests and people of the church. And then we have the second estate, which were the nobles. Think of aristocrats, think of fancy pants people, right? Then we have the third estate, which could be like shopkeepers and peasants and mostly your ordinary folks, some bourgeois, but there we go. Now, like we said, life was not equal for them beyond just the representation in the government. The clergy, for example, owned about 10% of the land of France. So they're like, all right, well, that's a pretty small part of the population. However, they also did not have to pay taxes. So 10% of that land was not taxed. Also, they were only 0.5% of the population. So though 10% seems small, if 0.5% owns 10%, you see how that's disproportionate, right? Now let's think about the nobility. The nobility owned about 25 to 30% of the land, so a decent chunk, but they were also tax exempt. So once again, right now you have about 35 to 40% of the land not getting taxed. They also were less than 2% of the population. So you might say, okay, only about 2% of the population is not being taxed. That's not a big deal. But when they own that much of the land and they're making that much profit, you can be like, well, it would really benefit France if that land was taxed and, their whatever they got. Now, most of them had like government jobs, and lived without want. Now, let me move the information on the clergy here. There we go. So I can tell you about the third estate. So the third estate owned about 60% of the land. So you might say, like, wow, well, they owned the most. Good for them, right? But they were almost all the population. So once again, not proportionate. They paid all the taxes, all of them, right? So they really didn't appreciate that. And a financial crisis strikes. So you have inflation. I know we talked about inflation like that's hitting Haiti right now. A donut, I think I said you may have been able to buy two donuts with $1. Now you can only buy one donut with $1. So your price, your dollar cannot get as much for you as it used to. And you know what? You shouldn't eat donuts anyway because they're not healthy for you. So that's not so bad. Keep in mind also I put a dollar sign. They were not using dollars, but as long as you get the idea. All right. There was a shortage of food. You get hungry people, right? A famine struck. A lot of people didn't have jobs, right? So not a good thing. The country was also in debt. Why was the country in debt? Well, maybe because Marie Antoinette was having all those fancy parties and stuff, but also they were in a lot of debt because they helped finance our American Revolution. So, hey, thanks, France. Thanks for supporting our revolution. Oh, yeah, now good luck with your own since you're in debt because you paid for ours. Yeah. So, what do they do with this financial crisis, right? The people up top were still not doing much of anything. They were still living the high life in Versailles, like, oh, sucks to be those people, right? They were still spending a lot of money on parties and hairdos and more parties and the House of Versailles and really nice food and more parties and more fancy hairdos and more parties and nice clothes. And the peasants were like, hey, we can't buy bread and you're our leaders and like what's up? You got all that stuff and you're spending all this money. How about you spend it on people not starving to death, right? Because like, hey, Versailles, like, do you really need to have yet another party when you can maybe give us some flour that you have stocked up back there so we can make some bread? Because we're still starving and we would like some. Please, please. So I'm going to end this here. I just wanted you to, like I said, you already know a lot of the causes. You know how it's inspired by the ideas of the American Revolution, all the ideas of the philosophes, how people are equal, how government should represent the people. You knew that there was a weather problem that caused some of the famine, but also all these other issues. I want you to see just how separate the three estates were as far as their population, their land ownership, and their taxes. Because when we do some annotations later, that's going to be important. All right, so go ahead and submit your form, and I'll